All right. Welcome back to Influential Dental, the podcast that's bringing on some of the most influential people in the dental space in the world. And I'm Julieanne O'Connor, co-host with my dear friend, Michael Keeter here. And we have a really awesome special guest, Dr. Michael Forde today. I can't wait to jump into this. But before we do that, Mike Keeter, my co-host, I love when we have two mics on here. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Julianne. Great to be here and very much look forward to our conversation with another mic. So more mics is always better. So thank you, Dr. Forde, for being on our podcast and look forward to jumping in and hearing all about your story.
Great to be here.
Dr. Forde, I'm so excited. So for those of you who don't know Dr. Forde, he has an incredible history in this industry, and we're really excited to have him on the show to share some of his journey. And we connected related actually to your Speakers Bureau. And then where did I run into you recently? Paul, where that was? It was
We
like one
saw
of our
each other
shows.
at Thrive
Oh,
Live
okay, at Thrive Live.
in Vegas.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And you were speaking, right? Did you speak?
I had just come off of 2 straight weeks of, I think, 7 different presentations in 2 weeks. So
Oh my
thankfully,
word.
those couple of days, I didn't have any presentations.
Yeah,
to
you
give.
did come in the back of my room. I know you snuck in, and nothing like making somebody nervous when there's somebody that you admire in the room. What were you speaking on in those 7 presentations?
My experience in implants and my experience as a private practice owner and my experience as somebody that referred patients to surgical practices in the past comes in kind of handy because I can communicate to those referral doctors in a way that they may not be used to hearing from other surgeons. So a lot of times we talk about implants and my experience with implants, why there are a lot of patients that need that treatment that don't get that treatment, and try and address some of those things really specifically.
Got it. So you're speaking for the referring doctors that are referring to the Paradigm practices, and they're outside
Correct.
of Paradigm then. And
Yeah.
and do you travel all over to do that then?
That 2 weeks, it was 2 weeks, so I've got to cover a lot of territory. I live in Orange County, so Orange County to Jersey, lecture in Jersey, went to New York, did something in New York, trained to Philly, lecture in Philly, flew to Denver, weekend course in Denver, Kansas City, lectures, Texas, lectures, back to New York. It was, yeah.
So,
I
Julianne, you
feel
have it easy then. I mean, you go and speak quite a bit, but I haven't heard that schedule yet. Hopefully, it's not the case that we
well,
have plenty of
you
stuff
just
to.
didn't look at the end of my week where I go to Dallas. I think I go to Jersey too. I think I can't even tell you, but yeah, I have an upcoming schedule that's a little bit similar, so I can definitely relate. And you have a family, right? How's your family support you with all the travel? Do they go with you?
Both the kids are in school, so my daughter will be a senior this year. She's finishing up her junior year. My son will be a freshman this year. So it's a little bit tough in the school year for them to get away and travel with me, especially when I'm gone for a couple of weeks. But, one of the best parts of this job is that I really don't travel like that. I think that was the only time I've ever traveled like that. It just the way things happened. Most of the time I'm gone for a day or two at a time, and that's it. So like, for example, tomorrow I'm going to go to Nashville, do something in Nashville Thursday, and then I'll be back Friday afternoon.
Got it. I'm literally going to go to Houston Thursday, speak Thursday night, and then wake up, speak again Friday morning in Houston, and then fly back Friday night. I
Yeah,
completely get that.
but
So
they support me for sure.
yeah. So, you are one of those guys that's been in the industry for a while, but you still look really young. So you're
I
doing something,
appreciate you
your
saying that.
mindset, your vibe. Seriously, though, it's interesting because this industry can age people if they're burning themselves out, right? And burning the candle at both ends, if you will.
Yep.
So what's your secret?
I guess it just depends on the day you catch me. Some days it doesn't necessarily feel like I manage it that well. I appreciate that you still think that I wear it well. No, I think for me, the biggest thing has always been to have interests outside of just work, to have interests outside of just dentistry. And over the years, well, I play guitar. You can't see all of them. I don't know if it's kind of embarrassing how many.
Yeah. So if anyone is listening right now and you're not watching the video, let me just tell you, he has a lot of guitars. And we have another friend that's in the industry that's got like 50, but I'm pretty sure you're right up there, right? Do you know how many you have? Have you counted them?
I don't. So that that
Means
tells
there's a
you
lot.
it is.
Okay.
It's not 50. I do know that it's less than 50. And lately, honestly, I've been thinking a lot about why the heck do I need all of these? I don't really need all of them, but they're all special. I love them all. They're all unique and just couldn't
So
bear to
what
part
do
with
you
any of them.
play? What's your jam? What do you most, and is one within reach where we can get a sample on the podcast?
For those that didn't join us at the beginning, we had a little bit of a snafu with some of the technical. I don't even want to tempt fate by trying to introduce a live performance with a musical
Okay.
instrument. So I
I get you
appreciate
probably
that.
get paid for that typically.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we'll have to circle back another time. We can
Yeah.
say
At
we're going
least
to bring the
scale.
singers back
Yeah.
and the.
Right. So tell us a little bit
Um,
about your musical journey, Dr. Forde, because
yeah.
you have beautiful guitars. They look electric. You have some amps there. So obviously you play loud, but tell us about your musical journey, how it started, and then what you're currently doing with it. And if you're in a band and the type of music genres that you do.
How much time do we have here? We could get very deep down a rabbit hole with just that one. But I grew up in a small town in Northern California, and one of the things that we did as a family was attend a church. And a big part of being a member of a small town, small church like that is music. I think, a lot of people that are professional musicians will talk about they got started singing in church or whatever. And so that was very similar for me. When I was about, I think 14, 15, we had a guitar. It was my dad's guitar when he was in high school that was just sitting out in the garage underneath a model train table. And the thing, I don't even know how it hadn't just turned to dust at that point, neglected, whatever. I picked it up. I think it had at that point maybe one string, two at the most, and I just started figuring out how to make it create sounds. And I don't know why. I don't remember specifically. I'm sure. So I am a Gen Xer, late 80s, early 90s. I probably was into all the hair metal bands that were on MTV at that time.
Guilty.
Yeah.
I think we're around
Yeah.
the same age, or I might be a little older. So yeah, love it all.
Yeah. So I was probably inspired by Bon Jovi's and all those people, and I should do that too. That's where it started. And I've been playing ever since. I took guitar lessons. There was actually a year after I graduated college where I went to a music school in Hollywood called Musicians Institute. So I've actually studied somewhat formally and been playing ever since.
So you said that one of the secrets was that you have
Yeah.
interests outside the industry. And this was something that I find fascinating because I will run into some people who have no interests outside the industry and then other people who have many. And so what other interests first and foremost? And then we'll go into the next series here questions.
Yeah, it's so I think I'm weird in a lot of ways, but I think one of the ways that I'm a little bit odd is that I will kind of go through these phases where I don't know, it's about every 4 or 5 years, I'll kind of get into something. And being wired the way that I am and most healthcare professionals are, it's like, you don't just sort of take a passing interest in it. You're all in. So I at one point I taught myself electronics and how to solder and build electronic things, which that's related to music because a lot of the pedals and things that you use for a guitar are these little electronic devices. Yeah, I worked on a private pilot's license for a while.
Did you get your pilot's license?
I didn't get all the way. I was right at the moment where I was supposed to solo, and then we moved, and I didn't pick it back up when we moved to the new place.
Well, you
So-
should let Julieanne know that because now she's going to challenge you and you're going to have your pilot's license in 6 months. So you heard it here
What?
first. Within the year, you will have your pilot's license.
Are you a pilot?
I am not. I enjoy it though and love people who go out and get it, but you were so close. But knowing Julieanne and how she coaches and trains, I'm just saying she's going to motivate you.
But I'll tell you, my dad was getting his pilot's license when I was really young. I forget, 9 years old. And they would allow me to go to the glider port and log the times in, excuse me. And then I would get flying lessons in exchange. So I didn't get paid. I just got flying lessons. And it was just such an incredible time. And then my dad soloed and
How
then
old were you?
passed away. I was like 9.
And they
Yeah,
were
very,
teaching you to fly an airplane?
yeah. And so it was, out in the dirt outside of Reno, Nevada, the little glider port. And I just
Wow.
remember what an incredible experience that was. So I commend you for doing that. And I actually have a couple clients who have their pilot's licenses. So very interesting that you were doing that. And then what else? And you
Yeah.
kind of remind me of Tim Ferriss, right? He did like and actually he makes you seem normal for what it's worth with the amount of things
Appreciate
he's
that.
tried. So what else?
My wife, Heather and I, we've been married now. It'll be 24 years in August. And I don't know why, but our honeymoon was in England and Scotland. I don't know why we didn't pick like, Hawaii or Bora Bora or Cozumel or let's go to England and Scotland in August. Why not? But we did, and it was amazing. And when we were over there, about halfway through the trip, I saw a documentary on the BBC about the history of this soccer club called Manchester United. At that point, I had no idea about professional leagues outside of the US, anything. And so it's 2 hours plus of the history of this club that's been around since the 1800s. And, there's so much history and legacy and the passion that people have, how much in the community, people identify that's, it's part of them, who they are. I just became kind of fanatical about it. And so English soccer or English football has been a thing for me too for the last 20 plus years.
That's amazing. Okay. So are you playing or just watching and a fan, just to be clear?
When I was in residency, I played all the time. And I was a resident in Minnesota. So even like January, February, when it was covered in snow, we wouldn't play outside, obviously, but there were all these indoor leagues, and I had played several times a week. So
yeah, I think it's probably pretty smart not to play in Minnesota in the winter playing soccer.
Even if you were crazy enough, you can't.
Yeah. And for those people that know, Dr. Forde went to Mayo for his residency and his pros. And I was going to say, young dentists listening to this, or young professionals, or anyone, get involved in a lot of different things, because that will lead you to success. And I love that, whether it's soccer, whether it's music, whether it's electronics. I do think that's very important to have things outside. And obviously your success has been driven by that. And so I did a little research as well. So Hope University, we did go to the Music Institute, USC grad. So I'm sure you're a proud Trojan. I'm an Oregon Duck. So, it is what it is. But Mayo, Dr. Sri Koka, I don't know if you know Dr. Koka.
Yeah,
of course. At the
Mayo.
But tell us a little bit more.
He was there when I was there.
Oh,
the time
was.
Overlapped.
Oh, that's amazing. Super good guy.
And that's how I know Sri is. He actually was the chair for my thesis, for the thesis committee. And I owe him all kinds of stuff. His mentorship and support when I was a resident, and his ability to just open some doors for me to do the research that I did that became my master's thesis.
He's incredible. I appreciate him for so many different reasons, as Mike is aware as well. And so that's amazing. It's such a small
It
world.
is such a small world. Well, let's talk a little bit more about dentistry. Now, being a prosthodontist, obviously, it does take a lot of work. I've been in the industry about 18 years and was with a major implant company, Nobel, and some of the different companies you work for. We crossed paths with a lot of people. But tell me about prosthodontics and getting that degree and where that led you into where you're at now.
Yeah, it's a little bit bittersweet that some of these are such long stories. I think it just means that I'm that much older. This is a harsh realization, but when I went to dental school, my initial thought was to actually go into oral surgery. And somewhere in my third year, and I think in those first couple of years, if you would have asked me, there would have been nowhere was I thinking about anything else. In my third year, I attended a lecture and heard somebody speak, and it was an all-day lecture at a place called the Newport Harbor Academy of Dentistry, which at that time was a very elite group that met, I think, at the Four Seasons in Fashion Island or Newport Coast, somewhere like that. And as a dental student, I got a chance to see, John Coyce and Frank Spear and people at that level. The person that I saw that day talked about implants all day. So here I am, a junior at dental school, 8 hours worth of people showing these really crazy, complicated implant courses. And at that point, this is 2001. Yeah, 2001. At that point, I didn't really have any exposure to implants at all. So it just went completely over my head. But it was fascinating. And there was an aspect of it that involved engineering and design and almost architecture and artistry. And I remember that it piqued my curiosity. I was really inspired by it. So I went back to school and I talked to some of my mentors. I said, how do I do that? I really, that was amazing. This doing these composites is fun and all, but like that was really interesting. And the consensus was to do a pros residency. Then the conversation was, well, where do you recommend I go? Yada, yada. One of the mentors said Mayo Clinic. And I grew up in Northern California. I never lived out of the state. I traveled a lot. Like there was no part of me that wanted to live in Minnesota. And he said, listen, I will pay for your flight. Just go look. Just go to Mayo, tour it, meet the people, just see it. And I'll pay for you to go. I thought, well, okay, if he's that serious about it. I did. And he was right. As soon as I stepped foot in Rochester onto that campus, it just is very inspiring as a young, developing healthcare professional to be in a place that was so elite, that had so many really bright people working together as a team, thousands of clinicians working together as a team, all of them committed to this notion that the needs of the patient come first. And that translates into so many things about the culture of that place that are really unique and very special. And it's something that I've always kind of obsessively tried to recreate wherever I go. So I saw it immediately and I thought there's no other place that I want to train. This is going to be the place.
So
Nice.
this is an incredible inspiration for me to even hear that, because obviously we all know the reputation, right? But generally speaking, and I work with high achievers, Mike and I build elite teams, and we've been through all the different types of leadership training, and from Disney to whatever else, from this industry to others. And you just don't always see that. And so when you talk to people who've gone through residency, mostly what I hear is horror stories. And most of the people who come to me midway through residency are trying to make a decision between cutting and running from the industry, or going all into just being a general and just going into implants outside of the specialty because they just want to throw in the towel. So what is so different? Like if somebody were to not know about what's going on there, what are they doing that allows them to inspire so many people to be on the same team?
We're going to really get down a rabbit hole on this one.
We love a good rabbit hole here.
Yeah, let's go.
Just opened up a whole thing. Okay. So there's so many layers to that. I don't even know where to start. So maybe let me start with this, what you mentioned, which I found to be true as well, that the experience of most people going through a residency program is not a positive, supportive, nurturing experience. It doesn't mean that, there aren't moments like that, but if they had to characterize it broadly, they wouldn't necessarily say, oh yeah, that was the time in my life that I felt the deepest sense of emotional security. And even though I was inexperienced and had to struggle with a lot of uncertainty about my ability and my knowledge base, I was insulated by these people that had their arms around me and made me feel like they got my back. It's okay to not know it all. It's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah, I have yet to hear that, by the way.
No, No.
before, unless you're
No.
about to share that you felt that.
I'm not. Well, so I've been thinking about this lately. So that's why I said you just open the box. If you go back to when did we even start doing residencies at all? The residency, the way that we know it nowadays, was kind of you can trace it to a guy that was a physician at Johns Hopkins in like the 1890s or something. And everything about residency, good and bad, comes from this structure that he created. So he was a physician. At that time, there weren't residencies. People were just apprentices. And, you would attach yourself to somebody that was local to you and you'd spend a certain amount of time with them. And, at some point you either went your own way or whatever else. Well, he decided, based on some of his experience in Europe and Germany in particular, what we ought to do is we should create a structured format so that you can take the less experienced surgeons and put them through a more definite period of time. And one of the most important parts of it is that they need to live at the hospital, hence the resident part. They need to be like completely immersed in this at all times. And so you start out at a low level of experience, and then each year or each period of time, you get elevated to this next thing. So the stratification and sort of the caste system of residency came from that. He was notorious for being a ridiculous workaholic, would not sleep for days on end, was prodigious in his creative academic output. And that energy that he had, or that whatever it was driving him, we actually do know, I'll get to that in a second, but whatever was driving him to be that way, that was his expectation of the residents. So this whole thing of, you got to be on for 80 plus hours a week. You never stop. You live at the hospital, obsession. Everything else is noise and a distraction. That came from him. He was a cocaine addict. And that, like, of course, working for days on end and not sleeping and everything was fueled by substance abuse. So that expectation of this is what you need to do during a residency was based on somebody being addicted to stimulants.
Wow.
And later, it's a sad story. I don't want to get too deep into that, but he went to different rehabs and things like that and tried to treat the addiction to cocaine. And the way that they tried to treat it was by giving him morphine. So he ended up being addicted to both cocaine and morphine. And the residency program and let the underlings do the work for the main doctor, a lot of it was to cover for the fact that he would go on these benders and disappear for stretches at a time, sometimes even months at a time. So I'm not saying everything about residency is bad for those reasons, but a lot of the things that we ascribe as being virtuous and noble are really a way for somebody that was an addict to hide the fact that he was an addict and function. I'm not saying it's all bad, but
it's fascinating actually, because it's so insightful, right? And I'm sorry, I know you're trying to speak, Mike. I just am so fascinated by.
I told you,
I did not know this story.
Yeah.
Well, no, and fast forward, many years later in current time as well, and the epidemic with substance abuse and burnout, which Julieanne and I speak on, and then what you deal with on a day-to-day basis, I'm sure within your organization, or when you're trying to find residents that want to come to your organization. So it's real, right? I mean,
yeah.
And it needs to be addressed, because I'm sure it wasn't addressed, because again, that was just the way it is. You at all cost have to do whatever it takes to be at this level. Well, there's a price to pay if you don't normalize yourself without extracurricular activities or a good support system or a mentor, some other things like that.
Well, you look at the effect on the brain from a neuroscience standpoint, no matter what. If you're continuously on overdrive, whether you're on cocaine or not, you're still wiring your brain to believe that this is how you have to operate. And that's what's causing the burnout. And so to such a degree, you also have to train yourself to settle down your nervous system. And so it's very, very interesting. I'm so grateful for this insight, because I think it actually is really valuable for people. So give us some more, so your experience going from this environment where it was very different than that and also how you're out teaching people. I know this comes up into conversation. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it directly impacted dentistry. And we're still living with the impact of that legacy from over 100 years ago. It has directly influenced the culture of medicine and dentistry. Because in the early days when we developed dental training, we basically just said, oh, what are they doing in medicine? It was all kind of new. What are they doing in medicine? And we just emulated it. We're like, oh, this is the way they do residency and they train. Dental school's a little bit different because, you only go through the 4 years. So I think that kind of the hazing and the professor comes over and looks at your wax up and is like, this is not good enough, and crushes it right in front of you. Like all of those things that most of us have experienced in dental training. Like you can draw a straight line back to this guy, Halsted was his name, at Johns Hopkins. The reason I say that is that we have a cultural issue that we have to deal with it every bit as much as we have this we have to obviously deal with the physiological impact of being in that state of heightened stress at all times. But none of that does any of us any good unless we also begin to look at the root cause of the problem, which is it's infused into the culture. And until we're able as a group of professionals to say, this isn't producing the best version of us, we're not going to be able to change it. And sorry, I told you that we opened the box. There's kind of a normal human response to enduring trauma that is to somehow rationalize it, or in your own mind, trying to resolve the conflict of, why did this happen to me? This shouldn't have happened to me. Why did this happen to me? And I think oftentimes, it's not just I think, research would suggest that a lot of ways that people try to process and manage that stress is to try and find some virtue in it and say, well, listen, it sucked, but I made it through it. And if I hadn't, then this wouldn't have happened. It's like, well, that's actually not true. We're just trying to rationalize the fact that we experience trauma. And people that endure that, I get it. I'm very sympathetic to the fact that, if you grew up and you had a really overbearing father, thankfully I didn't. But I'm sympathetic to the fact that if you grew up, you had a really overbearing father, never expressed affection for you, never told you, I'm proud of you. Everything was always, you're not good enough. And your whole identity becomes wrapped up in trying to please this other person. There's nothing about self-satisfaction or this sense of self. And you go on to rationalize it in a way that you're like, oh, well, my dad did this to me because, this is just how he cared. And that actually turned me into this person that was able to be successful. Because a lot of people will endure and they'll overcome, but they make the mistake of attributing that overcoming and that success to the abuse, because it's just abuse is all it is.
Yeah, and then they pay that forward thinking it's the right way to be.
They recreate it.
Yeah.
They recreate that either by seeking out other people to perpetuate that dynamic, or to then become the one that is sort of abusive to somebody else. Have you ever seen that movie Whiplash?
Should I see it?
I don't think so.
Like, there's something familiar about whether or not I saw it. It's kind of a quirky film. Like, it's been around for a long time.
Yeah, I want to say it's 10 years old or so. So
yeah,
it's this guy Damien Chazelle. He did La La Land and a couple of other movies. He's a musician.
Actually, I think I did see it.
So you got this young college kid who's a drummer, and he goes to a prestigious music school, and he's playing, and the head of the most elite jazz band on campus sort of, here's a plan, pokes his head in there, and they begin this mentor-mentee relationship, which is exactly what I'm talking about. It's abusive. It's toxic. It's, the guy says stuff in the film like, the two most harmful words in the English language are good job, but so I think that in a fictional sense, it's fiction. It's a movie. Like, you shouldn't take those things seriously. But I think in a way, it sort of gives an exaggerated version of that dynamic that a lot of us went through when we went through the medical or dental training, and sets us up to be either in this perpetual state of fight or flight, or we sometimes unconsciously recreate that dynamic in the organizations that we join or the way we lead our teams and our practices. And that's when I say the cultural part needs to be addressed. That's what I'm talking about. There's this level of self-awareness that we should all develop that says, okay, I did endure something that was actually dysfunctional and in some ways harmful. Not all of it, but
So I have a really funny story about this.
Yeah.
I was out teaching a group of referring doctors in this case, and I won't say where or who, but and there was a dad doctor who was basically handing off his practice to his son, who he had kind of pressed into the industry. The kid was just like, yeah, I'm doing it because I have to, but like a little sarcasm with every little jabs at every comment. And the dad is just like, yeah, well, you have to be disciplined. You have to work hard and you have to, no, no, no. And then I was going through my stuff that kind of breaks people free from what holds them back. And I was asking this dad about, what it is that it was in his nature that he most desired. And we were using actually a system that sort of shows the different reasons why people make decisions, right? And he literally held on so tightly, it's got to be disciplined, it's got to be this, it's got to be very technical, da, 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 da. And then at some point he just cracked. And he's like, if I really had to do it my way, I would have been free. I would have done this other thing. I would never have done this. And I just remember that breaking point where he got honest, And
Yeah.
it was, it was so surprising. And then I think even his kid had like an opening where he was able to go, oh, wait a second. It's not all that we've been taught. And there are elements, and some people do have that in their nature, but in this case, it wasn't that. And he had held to something that had made him very unhappy and then paid it forward into, and you see it a lot. And so it's very interesting because if people just have an opening, it's not to say there's anything wrong with going into this industry because you were encouraged to and at all. It's just to say that there are many ways to operate within it. And some are very sustainable and healthy, and others are maybe not so much. So how are you incorporating this into your teachings and your training and your speaking? Like, how are you helping your doctors, even in your own organization?
Yeah, I think that a lot of it comes from one-on-one mentoring, and this was true. This is true in the role at Paradigm, but also in the role at Clear Choice before that. It's very similar where I'm in a position where I am a fellow clinician that's having conversations with fellow clinicians, and I get to go see lots of different practices, be kind of a fly on the wall and look at culture, out in the wild, if you will. And it's really interesting how these things consciously or unconsciously will impact a culture of a practice, of an organization even. For me, the most powerful thing is because none of these changes can happen because I impose my ideology or philosophy or preference onto somebody else. It all stems from a self-awareness, and the self-awareness oftentimes involves having the ability to kind of realistically process some of the experience that you had, some of the relationship dynamics that you had, and become vulnerable and honest with yourself about how those things spill over into the way that you lead or that you relate to other people, what your dynamics are. Back to the whiplash thing real quick. It's funny because the guy that made the film, that was his experience going through high school, was that he had a teacher that was really abusive like that. And he talks about the fact that making that film was for him therapeutic. It was kind of a way for him to process, like, what was the point of all of that? I lived in a state of fear and anxiety for 4 years every day. And why? What was the point of it? And so, he made this film, and it's funny because half of the people leave the theater when they're done watching a movie, and half of them are like, see, that's what he had to go through to become that great.
Right.
You can't have that level of greatness without that level of suffering, which, listen, there's so much evidence in so many different fields for the last several decades to refute that notion. I get why people hang on to it. Again, a lot of it's like processing, this happened to me and I've got to find some kind of virtue in it. But, the special forces, like the military, you think, oh, the military, yeah, they got to like yell at people and you got to break them down to build them back up. It's not how the special forces don't train people like that. It's mentorship. It's putting people in environments where they're free to express themselves. They're free to express opinions that are critical of superiors without fear of repercussion. And, I think that's the biggest thing. There's a lady at Harvard, I think, Amy Edmondson, who all of her work's on psychological safety. And, when you look at the special forces or even in medicine over the last, 20 plus since the 80s, there's been a very intentional push of like, we can't have residents work like without sleep for 3 days. We have complications where people get hurt or unfortunately die sometimes. Like we've got to rein it in. There is no evidence to suggest there's virtue in the suffering in and of itself. There is some virtue in the fact that people can endure it, and there's virtue in the resilience in the face of suffering, but the suffering itself is not a positive force that is developmental in a helpful way.
There's so many things that I feel like Mike and I both want to unpack here for so many reasons. Like,
let's do it.
We build when we go to build elite teams, we kind of kid around because we bring in some of this proof behind the idea that actually it's in the psychological safety that people are allowed to create and bring in ideas and things that actually make things so much greater. And they don't have to look necessarily pretty in the way that they interact, but there is a safety in it. And our foundation is we come in, if they want us to come in and train them, we're like, okay, you have to give us a commitment. Everybody's job is safe right now. That everybody gets the opportunity starting out of the gate, that everybody has their job. And, that this is not a threat-based, area.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I have had 7 children through foster care, and I have one that's biological. So I've adopted 2. And
I love
most
that.
of what I have learned.
I've worked in group homes
Yeah.
and in the system. My initial degree, sorry, I'm not trying to make this about me.
No, I love it. It
All
is
I wanna
about
say
you, by
is-
the way.
All I want to say is that I do have a decent bit of experience in the system and know what it means for somebody like you to intervene in the life of a kid like that. And I don't think most people realize what a big deal that is. So good for you for doing that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's
And I
very.
agree, Julieanne. That is very
Yeah, I mean,
next
it's
one.
been a journey, but I will tell you that the majority of what I've learned that creates lasting change has actually come out of child psychology and learning about how to help children through traumas that are, seemingly extraordinary. And there's, so many directions we could go
And
with
Julieanne,
that.
a fun fact with that is Dr. Forde's undergrad was in psychology.
Right. Yeah.
You study
Amazing.
psychology, and my minor was in psychology. So we all have this kind of psychology background. And I do want to interject one thing. You're talking about a safe space and to do work and things. The single greatest thing that kills creativity and I think growth is fear. And
Yeah.
and that is something that I think you provide that safe space,
Yes.
and you let folks know that no matter what, sure, we have to go through some ups and downs, but you are free to participate in the well-being of yourself as well as the practice and be a leader of one. And I do want to touch on leadership when we have a chance to, because I know you wrote something recently in LinkedIn that I saw on leadership, but I agree with what you're saying. And Julieanne is the psychology of success or failure. It starts with that understanding. Of course, you have to be clinically relevant and know clinically, but so many practices, and I see organizations, and why we do what we do is to really help provide that influence or that opportunity to be in that safe space. So, Julieanne, sorry I didn't interrupt, but I was holding on to a little bit of that.
I appreciate what you're saying completely. And I think, so it's fascinating to me because one of the things that I'd love to at some point start to write about a little bit is what's happening in the dental space specifically, because you see where there's this high rate of suicide and these different things. And I myself have been sort of always behind the scenes, kind of secretly trying to study where are these people coming from? Where is what is the foundation of their belief systems? And many of them have come out of very traumatic situations. Many of them have come from, war-torn countries. Some of the things that people maybe don't even know, you start to see these trends, right, across the board of some of the people who are really suffering with mental health issues. There is also an element of pain and medicine, right? People taking things for pain management that has also led to this. Both of my children were born drug addicted. One of them had to detox using morphine. For 2 months, she was on morphine in a NICU to detox off of meth and heroin. The other one on methadone, detoxing off of 5 different drugs, And so I can talk about that freely now because I've adopted them, but that then creates some biological concerns, right? In addition to the fact that they've come through those traumas. Now, my kids are doing phenomenal. I'm so grateful on every level. But if you start to look at all of these different things that are affecting, there are trends, and it's unquestionable that part of that is also the cultures that we're creating that cause people to either turn to things or run from things or act a certain way or feel there's a certain expectation of them that is beyond reason. And so let's go back to you. I don't want to, this is not about me. It is about you because this is creating all of these thoughts, things for people to think about. And I think it's amazing. And especially in an oral surgery environment where you have, how many practices do you guys have at Paradigm?
We're adding all the time. It's nice to be part of an organization that's actually growing.
Right.
Yeah. And, can't take that for granted these days.
Right.
We're over 150. We're over 150. And, the process of adding new offices is a whole team's full-time job. So there's that much that's in the works that you need a whole team of people.
And across how many states?
33 now.
So all over.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you are single-handedly in there, hands-on with being a piece of what determines what this culture looks like in a massive group, basically, of also many, many, many surgeons who have come out of these residencies that we have been talking about, right?
Right.
So how do you have an effect on a culture where they're coming into it with this mindset already that this is how you have to be? Right. And obviously you're also trying to grow and hit numbers and all these things.
Yeah.
Like, how do you navigate that?
It is as complicated as it sounds, when you describe it is that complicated. But I think a lot of it begins with naming it. Hey, we have these unrealistic expectations because they were created by a guy that was all hopped up on the go fast, And so, hey, maybe we should rethink what is reasonable for the expectations. But there's such a long history of, the means have the end has justified the means. 100 years of the end, more than that, what we ended up getting out of that system was good. So the system itself must be good. I'm not saying it's all bad, but you know what I mean. We have not been, we've not always been free to challenge whether or not there's room for improvement or whether or not there are aspects of it that are toxic and unhealthy. And I mean, I've experienced that myself. That resistance. I get it. I'm not, bad mouthing individuals. I understand why people are sentimental about defending the goodness of what caused them to get to the point where they are and be successful. I understand that and can relate to it to a certain extent, but it's naming it and acknowledging that we're trying to meet a set of expectations that were created under circumstances that were by definition pathological, and that somehow being critical of those expectations or thinking about different ways to do it that might involve things like psychological safety, the antithesis of the tough love that we got, is not making things more weak. Now, there's a stigma associated with some of we're coddling, where these people are just not tough enough to endure it. That's not what the research would suggest. The notion that it's toughness and and your ability to endure that, that's the valuable part. So the research doesn't suggest that at all. I lost the train of thought. So I think it's naming it. It's giving people the permission to feel safe that it's okay to ask questions of this heritage, legacy, and culture that helped us develop, and that asking the question, can we change this and improve it, doesn't mean that we're somehow diluting it, or we're somehow it's losing some of its luster. I've been in situations where, I remember one, I'll be vague here because I don't want these to be about people. It's about that culture, and it could be any one of us that says or does some of this stuff. But I've been in situations where I've talked to a group of doctors, I've surveyed them and said, hey, to what extent are any of you in the last, say, 6 months or so feeling like you've experienced burnout? Very just kind of an open question. And the intent of asking a question like that is just to begin a dialogue. And more than that, to give people a sense that, hey, it's okay to talk about this. If we say, you know what, I felt burned out, it doesn't mean that you're no longer fit to do this, that, now you're weak and now you somehow you got to get cast aside. You can't endure it. And anyways, the point there is that when I asked those questions, I was met with like, well, why would you ask people that? If you ask people that, then they're going to start thinking about it. And if they just don't think about it, then it's not going to be a problem. I'm like, well,
I love this.
This is not how that works, actually.
No.
Right. It either is real or it's not. And it sounds like it's real, right?
My other favorite one was, I don't even know why you'd ask that. We don't get burned out in this organization. I'm like,
yeah. So I have a funny story that I was at a full arch training center once, and
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's just funny because they had all these different breakout sessions and people were learning about the surgeries, and they could go, and it was, all these doctors and their teams, and they were all invited to break out to whatever area they wanted to learn about, treatment coordinating, or, the phones, or the meet with associates or whatever. And I made the mistake by accident. I was the only person, I was a trainer there, but I was not leading a breakout session. And I just threw it on the table. I was like, okay, and if you have no place that you wanted to go, then I'll go to the lobby. And if you want to talk about burnout, meet me there. Well, it sucked. Everybody went to the lobby, and all these other, and I was like, oh no, what have I done?
Yeah.
And it was so insightful, because at the end of the day, I believe you should be talking about it. Challenge thought and allow people to say, because then they can take responsibility to prevent it. And they themselves can begin to support themselves, and other people can be supportive. I mean, stop pretending like it's not real. It's happening.
Again, all of those expectations are based on expectations that were created under circumstances that were by definition pathological, and continue to be reinforced as virtuous because it's a response to trauma. Like, none of those things are actually from a psychological standpoint. Those are not the ways that you help people to develop into well adjusted, self-actualized, high-functioning, emotionally intelligent individuals. What you get are people that learn how to sort of just cope and not fall apart. It's like, well, I think that we can have an expectation that's a level above. I'm just holding it together so that I don't completely fall off the rails. What if the expectation was we can be emotionally intelligent, self-aware, self-actualized? Like, doesn't that sound like that might be better?
And guess what?
Breathing.
And have fun and enjoy ourselves and be part of a team. And one thing we didn't talk about, but there's the doctors, but there's also 20 or 30 other people that are part of the team in the office that are going through a lot of similar things at a different level. And we had talked about, what it had been in dentistry. But the whole dynamic has changed with technology, but with the labor shortage, which a lot of different things. I think it behooves organizations, and it sounds like yours is, to offer that safe space, to have those conversations, to make sure it's a team of one, and to be that leader of one when needed.
Mike, we need to implement this in our own business. What's going on?
That's right, Julieanne.
Let's talk about this. Mike's been running me ragged lately.
I think, that's something that has become really obvious to me is whether or not you're just the doctor that is the leader of, like in my private practice, 5 people in one office, or whether or not you're the chief clinical officer, or whether or not you're whatever your role is. Every decision that you make, every response you have has an impact in some way, whether you want it to or not. And I think what I have found some of the most dangerous responses are the failure to respond. Let's the somebody gets up at a doctor meeting, and we'll go back to whiplash again. Somebody gets up at a doctor meeting, and they say the 2 most harmful words in the English language are "good job," and the whole organization hears that coming from a leader of the organization. Unless somebody steps in and says, no, that is not the culture that we want here. It's an endorsement. The silence is an endorsement. The inability to respond to things like that becomes every bit as critical as what you do in a proactive sense. And
which comes from that fear of safety that you can challenge things.
Exactly. Yeah. And this, it's become really obvious to me that the higher up you get in an organization, you're actually more responsible for the experience, the decisions you make, whether they're active or passive. The decisions you make have the ability to influence really everybody throughout the organization, because it will send a signal to everybody that says, hey, the mission statement that we have written on the wall, or the values that we have written on the wall, they're great for you guys, but we're willing to tolerate somebody else violating those values, and there's no consequence. Those things can have a profound negative impact on an organization. One of my favorite examples of the remove the fear and see what happens is actually Pixar. I don't know if you've ever read Ed Catmull's book, whatever is it Creativity Inc. or something like that?
I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, it's great. So he talks about Pixar has this brain trust, or they did. Spoiler alert. I will give it away. They did.
Right.
So for a long time, they had this brain trust, and the rules of the brain trust were we get to sit and we get to watch what's being developed, and everybody in the room is free, has permission to be critical of it. And the person that was responsible, director, producer, or whatever, their obligation is to not take that feedback personally. And also they're not obligated to take the feedback and actually do something with it. So there's not really a consequence in any way. People are just free to say what they want to say. And it's no surprise that while they had that system in place, like one film after the next from Pixar was a hit, and they were fantastic. And then the brain trust went away, and they had some stinkers. So having that environment where, again, the psychological safety, where people feel like they're free to express themselves without repercussion, without retaliation, and without fear of being criticized for being weak or less than or not up to the toughness standard or whatever BS. Especially in healthcare, those things are really dangerous. When people don't speak up, that's when bad things happen to patients. When people don't feel like they can speak up, or if this becomes really personal to me around innovation, especially like the implementation of new technology for clinical workflows. If we're so afraid of making a mistake, the way we're operating from a place of, I'm not going to do anything unless I know with 100% certainty that nothing will go wrong. So I don't look bad. I don't embarrass myself, whatever. Somebody doesn't yell at me. If that's the case, you're going to be so protective, you're never going to innovate. You're never going to produce anything.
Well, there's some great examples on how that has actually caused tremendous amounts of harm, where somebody was too afraid to speak up to their superior, but they saw that there was a problem. They didn't question it out loud. Yeah.
2 shuttle disasters. Yeah.
And also in healthcare, there's some incredible stories. I'll have to pull them up on Google or something to share on one of our future episodes. But this has been so interesting, and we're coming down to the wire, but I would love to continue this conversation because it's not only really in my heart of fascination, but everything you're saying is so spot on. And I love whether it
Appreciate it.
challenges somebody to think that you're right or you're wrong. It's definitely, in line with what Mike and I are always out there really trying to open the channels for people to be able to share and really begin to discuss these things, because I think it's such an important conversation to have. And if we want to affect not only this culture within our industry, but also our world and the way people parent and so many things that can have an effect, then I think these are conversations we need to be having. And I can't tell you how excited I am to have had you on the show today. I don't want to cut us off. We are past the hour. Mike, I know you have a couple of questions. Do you want
Yeah,
to
no,
ask a couple of questions before
this has
we
been just
wrap up?
a amazing conversation, and no, it all matters. And you struck something with me that words do matter, and what you say does resonate, and you do have influence. Whether you're, an assistant or you're a new dentist or you're, the CEO or the chief medical officer, you can change. And I have another quick story. My brother shared this with me yesterday with a football coach, and he was talking about influence and working in a team environment. He said, we really teach and hit home if you're a sports fan or football. He said, you're responsible for 20 by 20. That is your job. And then take care of that. Then you can have influence outside of that if you so choose. So I kind of like that analogy that sure, do what you need to do, but don't lose fact that you're also a part of the team and you should speak up if you see something wrong, or you do want to challenge the status quo, or you do want to be better, not to fear of retaliation, because I do think a lot of people do suffer in silence. And I really do enjoy these type of conversations where it's more about pure clinical, because yes, of course, everyone should be clinically their best in dentistry or any profession they have, but we are all human beings, right? And we deal with human beings, and that gets brushed aside so much. So I do thank you for addressing that. I obviously you do that within your organization as well, and sharing this with our
Yeah,
audience.
I'm really lucky to be part of an organization like Paradigm. I know we're over time, and you definitely don't want me going down this track because I could talk forever about it.
We'll break it into 2 episodes.
Yeah,
It's okay.
Dr. Rawlis, who's the CEO of Paradigm, he and I were residents together at Mayo plus years ago. Over, and
So you have a couple of really incredible leaders in
and
this
there's a lot of
organization.
folks that began their healthcare careers in an environment where, it is definitely traditional, but those two brothers 100 years ago decided at some point that what's really important is that we just do everything that we can to provide the highest level of care for patients. And all the other stuff will take care of itself. So we're not going to have turf wars within our institution. We're not going to have prima donnas and big discrepancies between who gets paid what. And so I promise I'll stop. I'm having fun too. No, but even as a resident, not just a resident, but a dentist resident, I was part of treatment teams that included ear, nose, and throat surgery and oncologists and neurologists and orthopedic surgeons. And there was never a single moment and some of these folks were world renowned. There was never a single moment where I felt like I was regarded as less than or somehow inferior. And that's a byproduct of a mentality that two brothers had about how they would create an organization that was focused on patient care and nothing else. So it's all that to say that permeates Paradigm, and it's a great thing to be part of it. One last one, just a little humble brag. We recently announced that we now have a formal partnership with Mayo Clinic. So
Congratulations.
Congrats.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And before we wrap up, I want to give a shout out to our partners with Influential Dental, which is American Dental Institute. They're all about collaboration. So I really appreciate them. And you're making me think about how important these collaborations are. But you guys also have created and opened a facility, have you not, in Denver? Yep. Is that right?
Yeah, the Paradigm Innovation Institute. So I could tell you what it is, and we could spend some time on what it is, but I think I'm most excited about the fact that it has the potential to be way more than we even dream. So
yeah, I'm
Really
excited.
excited
I
how
would
that
love.
Stay
evolves over
tuned.
time.
So first of all, I'd love to invite Dr. Rollis to be on our show. Okay. And that I just want to throw that out there. It's public now. But second of all, I would love to have you back at some point as well. We don't record a ton of podcasts. We release every 2 weeks. So we're kind of a unique podcast. I know we were at Thrive Live. We were podcasting right next to Dr. Costas and Mark Costas. They do 5 a week. I don't even know how they do it. We've been on their show. They've been on ours. Love the guy, but I'm so impressed by that. So we have a little bit more limited number of recordings, but I definitely love this conversation. I think it's a really powerful and important one. I have a hunch we could talk for another hour, but I do want to be mindful of the expectations of our listeners and keep it to an hour for this particular one or close to. I know we're a little over. Mike, do you want to wrap us up today?
Yeah, no, thank you, Julieanne. And I agree. This was a phenomenal conversation. Again, thank you very much, Dr. Forde, for having us. And again, thank you, American Dental Institute, for being our collaborators on this show. And Julieanne, thank you as well for all these wonderful podcasts and you being a great partner together with the Influential Dental. And I want to say to all the listeners and people that watch, dentists as well as team members, take to what you heard today to heart. Yes, be clinically relevant, be clinically at the top of your game, but also take care of each other and take care of your patients and speak up when something's not right or doesn't feel right. And as Julieanne said to me, right, we only have one life to live, so live at your best. So anyway, thank you, Dr. Forde. Thank you, Julieanne O'Connor, and thank you to all of our listeners.
Dr. Forde, thank you again for being out. We usually have time to say, are there any last words or something? But
You don't want to open that door for me. I'll keep us here 2-3 hours.
Yeah, it's been awesome. I appreciate you so much. Thank you to our listeners. Really appreciate everybody for the show. Thank you.